Welcome back to Cheyenne, Wyoming Urban Gardener. This is Debbie in part 2 of the video. I actually filmed this earlier this morning. It is now evening, late this evening on July 10th. And the reason that I had to stop is that I kept getting interrupted the entire time. And the video kind of got ruined, and then my phone overheated because it was in the 90s again today. Tomorrow it's supposed to be much cooler, but we are in the evening time right now. So it's a lot cooler this evening. Anyway, we left off here in the north side of the garden and just wanted to go through the rest of the plants with you. Of course, we got the Big Max pumpkins that were given to us by Suburban Homesteader Wyoming / Arizona. And they have gotten a lot bigger even just today. In the first part of the video that I went through, they were actually a little bit smaller. And then of course we've got all of the sunflowers that we planted recently that are coming up, and our Ocassaman squash over here by itself. It's actually putting on a little bit more growth today as well, but I'm not real sure it's going to do a whole lot over here on the north side. That's why we have the Ocassaman planted as well on the south section, because Sandy from Suburban Homesteader / Wyoming / Arizona, she sent me some more seeds to replace the ones that didn't come up. So thank you to that, Sandy. And those are up. I'll show you those in just a few minutes. And it's very windy now this evening because we've had a couple of storms come through. We may even get another storm. But anyway, the bok choy had went to seed. You can see that it's bloomed there, and I'm going to be pulling that out and planting some pak choy instead. Rhubarb is still doing amazing out here. And even a lot of growth just today on the pumpkin. It's kind of spilling over now, and it looks like it's going to go this way, and I'm going to have to try to train it to go back that way. So all of our flowers still blooming like crazy. Looking beautiful. Geraniums I had to move over here on this side because they were not getting enough sun. And they did bloom a lot today, just today, which they really, really needed. Just beautiful color. And I went ahead and moved the parsley over here in its place down a little bit further where the potatoes are, because the parsley was not liking the heat as much as the geraniums were. So I moved that on down there. Our lemon balm has grown significantly today, as well as the oregano. You can actually see all the little oregano up in there. I'm going to move this over to the south side in some more sun now that it's gotten well established, and it'll definitely pick up growth then as well. Sage doing amazing, just filling out the pot, and more new growth on the rosemary, which is surprising. And all of our zinnias and flowers that we planted in this strip through here, along with our sunflowers, are doing amazing. And we're getting some marigolds coming up in here because I planted marigolds, sunflowers, and cosmos, and a few other things in here. So looking great. Our thyme looking great. Fuchsia doing wonderful. Hey, it's just really windy, but the wind is actually up high, as you can see here. You see the wind is just whipping around, and I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it's very, very windy out here. But it's not really that down low too much. It's just kind of a little bit breezy through here. So I hope it doesn't move down low. All of our cabbages and everything, putting on a lot of growth, doing amazing. I did notice a lot of growth on that cabbage right there. That one was damaged a little bit, so I was surprised to see some extra growth in it just today. And then we've got some more cabbages in here that are planted that had just came up a few days ago, and they're starting to get bigger, some of the red cabbages. Now, I did start some Danish ballhead cabbage in here as well. It's not up yet, but I did plant it in between each of the cabbage here, so they'll have enough room to get some size on them. I just want to see how they grow. I'm not real sure they'll actually do anything because it's very late in the season for them, and they take a pretty long growing season. Cauliflower doing amazing, as well as the broccoli. Lettuce doing really well that we planted, along with the spinach, all the celery. Celery is just about to the point where we can start harvesting some of it. The stalks have gotten pretty thick in there. And then this is the tango celery that we picked up from Menards. And there were 15 of them. And I kind of separated them out and put them in here. Even the ones that were struggling a bit are catching up in growth now. And I'm just going to keep harvesting the old stalks on it, because it seems to really prompt new growth on them, and the new growth is a lot more healthy. Zucchini is doing great, definitely getting bigger. This one right here was one of the first ones that came up, so it's probably going to bloom pretty soon. But the other ones are definitely putting on size very quickly as well. We've got blooms all over the peppers, and they're really beginning to spread out now. And several of them actually had their tops broken when I bought them. So, and again, I got these peppers for $1 a pack because there was some missing peppers in some of the spots. But there was some peppers that had doubles in them, and the tops had been broken on some of them. So now they've got 2 and 3 tops on them, so they're definitely beginning to fill out. And we should hopefully get more peppers on them because of the fact that those tops were broken. But we'll see. And lots of growth on the yellow straight neck squash, as well as the peppers that I planted from my own seed. They've gotten a lot of new growth on them just in the last couple of days, so they're really liking the heat. And this is the red curry squash. They're beginning to put on their runners now, and the ones that we filled in. That one right there seems to have some sort of issue with growth, so I may pull that one out, because if you look at it, it just really hasn't grown a whole lot, and the leaves that are coming on are a little weird. So I'm going to pull that one out and then just leave these 2, or I may transplant one of those over there, because there's something wrong with those 2, and I'm not sure what it is. So we'll get those pulled out tomorrow. And our lettuce has just exploded over there. We've got a lot of it that has went to seed, so I'm going to have to get back there and pull some of that out. But we've got a head of lettuce right there that's actually quite beautiful, that was not supposed to be there. Noticed a lot of growth on our okra as well. Again, this is a shorter variety of okra, a dwarf size, but there's a lot of growth on it. So I'm hopeful that it's going to do something. We still have plenty of time. And yellow straight neck squash is doing amazing as well. Got a couple of them that looks like they'll start blooming pretty soon. And again, the peas are just amazing to me. They have overlapped the 2 shorter sections of trellis, and these sections were not actually shorter. They were the same size as these. They just have longer legs on them, so they're down in the soil pretty far. So lots of growth on the peas, and they're blooming, and they're actually putting on peas right now. But still, just a massive amount of growth on them. And I'm looking at these, and I'm thinking that they're actually going to reach the top of the trellis, if not go over the top. So there's just lots of growth still left in them there. And then we've got the next row right here that is coming on. It's actually starting to lean over now and has some runners going into the other peas. So they'll definitely catch up here very soon to those original row of peas. And then we've got more peas to plant. We're going to put another row in between these because there's plenty of space right there. And we'll probably put another row in here because we've got 2 new rows in here. Again, there's 3 rows on each side, but we'll go ahead and put another row right here and see if we can get some more peas going, and then possibly another row over here. So lots of growth on there. They're definitely filling out like crazy, blooming like crazy. Tomatoes are setting tomatoes on them and definitely getting a lot bigger. And then all of our calendula just doing amazing through here. And again, we have zinnias and cosmos and bachelor buttons and various sunflowers and all kinds of things going on in here as well. So those are doing fantastic. And we've got more calendula planted right here along with bachelor buttons. And I'm going to throw some zinnias in here, I think, even though it's pretty shaded over here. And we do have a row of mustard that we planted through here. It's the Florida broadleaf mustard. I need to get in and thin it. But we do have a row that goes all along the front of the potatoes. And right now it'll be kind of small because it's kind of getting shaded out. But once I remove the potatoes, which shouldn't be too long because they are blooming, all of them, right now. And the vines will start dying back in the next couple of weeks. Once that starts to happen, and I know the potatoes are set, I'll dig down and check them just to make sure. Then I will go ahead and get those harvested, and then it'll leave those that mustard, and then a whole section here that we can plant in turnips or something like that for winter crop. If it stays warm enough, I might even plant some more squash in there. We'll just find out what we think we'll put in there. But anyway, everything is doing just so amazing out here in the garden. If we just do not get hit with a hailstorm, and I keep saying that the whole season, because it can happen anytime in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It would be amazing if we do not. But every day that there's a storm, like there is going on right now, I worry that there might be hail that comes along with it. But anyway, we've got a couple more squash over here, and these are acorn squash, white acorn squash. They're actually putting on some extra leaves now, and maybe they'll catch up with the rest. Our pot over here is doing great. Again, roses blooming like crazy still. And this rose bush will actually bloom again before fall. So all of these will come off, and then it'll bloom a lot lighter on the second run, but it'll usually bloom a second time. And we got our comfrey, as I mentioned earlier, transplanted into a bigger pot. And it definitely picked up some growth today. And I need to trim that one leaf off because it looks pretty bad. But everything through here just doing great. And we're supposed to have temperatures for the rest of this week and for next week in the 80s and 90s. So the nasturtium and everything will definitely start putting runners and things like that on. You can see the nasturtium back there in the back. And then we've got more bachelor's buttons there. And our artichokes, and they definitely put on some growth today. I can see it. Again, onions doing amazing. Definitely getting some size on the onions down there. I worry a little bit about some of the leaves looking like they're browning a bit because I don't want them to start dying back and they are not even really finished heading up. But as I mentioned, the soil in Cheyenne, Wyoming can be kind of cool, so that's a very real possibility that could happen, and we could end up with not very big onions. Like I said, I've only had big onions here one time, and I actually used slips and not sets, and these were sets. It's very difficult to find slips here that are quality sets because usually by the time you get them, they're already so dried up that I haven't had very good experience with them. But next season, we'll try to get some slips and try those. Again, these are the Stuttgarter onions as well as the Pentium 2. And I think there's some Walla Walla in here. There's just all kinds of onion types in here. And again, the tomatoes, just giving you a little overview of those. They have definitely put on a lot of growth today, even from the first part of the video, because it has just been so warm. And then it's been raining every evening, so they definitely have loved the natural water versus having us come out with a hose, which is chlorine water. They don't like that at all, really. And the beans, amazing amount of growth, and it looks like that maybe even the rattlesnake pole beans will pull out of this funk that they're in. They just seem to be a little bit slow, and I just think the soil's probably a little bit too cool for them. But I did have one that did put on a runner and is wanting to climb the trellis. You can see it right there. And some of the other ones are looking big too. Again, this was a second planting over here because they came up really thin over in this section. And that was, at first I planted the Kentucky Wonders over here and they just didn't do very well. So I went ahead and planted a second run of rattlesnake pole beans in here when I found the seed. So they're kind of a little bit behind the other guys. The half runners are already up the trellis, a lot of them. So we've got them going up the trellis and getting bigger on some of the rest of them. And then of course the bush beans are already producing. We've got beans growing on these, and they're blooming. And even our Japanese yard long are now climbing the trellis. You can see that there. And of course these are the older Japanese yard longs. They didn't come up in the back, if you remember and go back in some of my videos at the very beginning of the season. The ones in the back did not come up, so I had to replant those. Our peppers are doing great. We've got a little bit of some sun scald on one of the peppers that produced, but it'll have more peppers come on. There's lots of blooms on there. And we've got a couple of peppers on this one and still blooms on it. And then we have our giant oxheart tomatoes and old German tomatoes in there, and they're definitely getting bigger, but they were some of the smaller ones that I did plant out, so they're not quite at the height that the other ones have. And I did transplant, if you remember, a Sun Sugar Gold tomato out here to replace one that I lost that just died off for some reason, and it's actually doing pretty well. I did go ahead and trim up a couple of the San Marzanos that were struggling, that had either a copper deficiency or something, and I'm just trying to see if they will come back out, but they are still kind of struggling, so I may go ahead and replace those two with some suckers that I have rooted, of either the old German or the super sauce tomatoes. I would prefer the super sauce, but the super sauce tomato suckers that I'm getting off, they don't have very many suckers to begin with, but the suckers that I have gotten off of them have been kind of small, so they would take a long time to get up to the size that the other super sauce are. So I may use the old German because they don't take quite as long, I've noticed, to really start getting some size on them. And of course we have the giant oxhearts in there as well. They don't have a lot of suckers either. I've noticed that about the super sauce and the old German and the giant oxhearts. They don't have a whole lot of suckers, and the suckers they do have tend to be smaller, and kind of hard to just take them off and then root those. So it's a lot easier, I've noticed, with the cherry tomatoes like the Sun Sugar Gold and the pear tomatoes. They have a lot of suckers, and even the tomatillos had some suckers. I've got one sucker that I'm getting rooted inside, and I will be planting that one out here as well. I've got a little bit of room left right over there, so I may go ahead and stick it in that area, or I may put it in a container. I haven't decided yet. And then we have some zinnias here planted right along this front section, and they're doing really well. We did have some Hungarian blue poppies in there, and they're still there, but they're just really, really small, not doing very well. So I don't think they like this climate. But it's funny because we have a neighbor who has poppies every single season, but I think they may have actually bought them at a store and then planted them in the ground, and that's how they ended up with them. So I may try that next season. And of course my grandson's little garden beds here are just doing wonderful. The only thing that's kind of struggling is the cucumbers that I planted, and I just think they're just not getting enough light, because it is kind of a little shady over here, but everything else seems to be doing really well. His tomatoes are doing really well, a little bit slower than the rest because, again, probably shading, but they are growing, and they are producing. Got little tomatoes on there, so we'll see how that does. And then here's the Guido Kassaman squash. They've definitely put on some size today, and they're starting to throw out their extra leaves. So hopefully we'll get something from them. I'm just crossing fingers and hoping. And you can see the lemon cucumber right there. That is doing really well. I'm actually going to trellis that on this green trellis here. So it's going to go around the front, and then the pumpkins, these Guido Kassaman, will go that way. They will go out towards the corn. And then we have some white pumpkins tucked in there as well. So they'll intermingle with each other. They may end up crossing. Who knows? I don't really care. They're all squash, and I love it all, no matter what the cross might be. The Kennebec potatoes, still doing amazing. It's a little bit slow to bloom. They've got blooms on them, but they just haven't opened up yet. And I just think it was the heat that really hit them pretty hard. And they didn't really like that heat so much. But they'll still bloom. They're just a little bit slower than the Yukon Gold because they're a late season potato versus the Yukon Gold being a little bit of a mid-season potato. So you can see all the bloom heads on there. Like right here is a bloom head getting ready to open, and then we have another one here. So they've all got bloom heads on them. They just haven't completely bloomed. The ones in the back sometimes do not bloom because it's so shaded back here. And the plants back here actually tend to be bigger than the ones up in the front section, which is pretty interesting. You can see that. They're just huge plants. And then last season, if you remember, I had an issue with the Kennebecs actually dying back. They did not die back at the end of the season. I just kind of had to just bite the bullet and take them out anyway. So lots of potatoes through there. The wind is really picking up now. But I think it's just wind. I'm not really seeing anything precipitation wise, except over in a section where we're not going to be hit with, and that's over in there. If you look over here, which is where most of it comes from, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of action there, just a few clouds. Anyway, these are the Kellogg's breakfast tomatoes, and they have definitely put on a lot of size, but they are slower. They are a orange or yellow tomato, and they're getting big. They're definitely being big plants, but they're slow, very, very slow. I noticed they had a long season to come on, so I don't know if they will do anything or not. And as a surprise that happened a little bit after the first part of this video is that we had one of the people that comes out and picks up plants and things like that out of the group. She came over, but she wasn't picking up any plants or anything. She actually brought me some more pots. So I use any pot, it doesn't matter, any container works for me, and I just like to fill them and then sometimes use them myself, or I give them out to others. Most of the time just give them out to others with a plant in them. But she brought me so many pots that she has, and they are big pots, most of them anyway. There's some little ones in there, but most of them are really big pots. So thank you to her for bringing those out to me, because we will use every one of them. And that's what I do. If you see, here is where I've been transplanting a lot of the flowers that had came up from seed over into these pots to give out to people who didn't maybe have a garden this year, or maybe got their garden killed out by hail or some sort of damage, wind damage. So we've got some things in there to give out to the public. And then of course all of our containers doing fantastic. And the corn has put on so much growth. And as I mentioned, when they get about 2.5 feet tall is when they start to go to tassel, because they only get to about 4 to 4.5 feet tall. And that's exactly what they're doing. There's the tassel right now. And this corn in particular, it took a lot of wind because it's right here on the edge. It's the first little row here. And it got hit with a lot of wind, and you can see it kind of bent it over a little bit. But they will still produce just fine. You can see another tassel here on this one. And they get most of the sun, so these guys are the biggest ones. But they are striking me right now at about my waist. So they're about 3 feet tall at this point, and they will reach it to the 4 and 4.5 feet once the tassels come up. And we'll have little 8-inch ears on every single one of these, hopefully. But lots of corn in there, at least for us, because we have such a small area to grow. But this is the most corn that I've ever had. Even though we just have a small patch, I'll stand back and let you see that we have a pretty small area to grow. And again, it's kind of a modified Three Sisters. We have the Tahitian squash over here in front. You can see here there's a Tahitian squash there, and there, and there, and there. So we have 4 Tahitian squash in here, and they will put up their runners, and then they will mingle in amongst the corn I don't really care if they climb the corn. I don't want them to do that, to be honest. Just want them to run down between in the rows, and they help keep the weeds out, because we have beans planted in there as well behind every bit of the corn. Each one has a row of beans, including the royal burgundy beans in the back. So we don't really want them to climb the corn so much as just provide a weed barrier, basically smothering out the weeds that would come up. And we have not had a whole lot of weeds this season, so that is fantastic. We've had a few, but I've been keeping most of them at bay. Nasturtium planted back here has all came up at this point, and it's actually starting to get pretty big. It's actually bigger than the other nasturtium that I have planted. So you can see that they have came up, getting bigger. All the zinnias here are getting ready to bloom. And a little trick with zinnias is once they start to form a bloom head on them, pinch it off, and they will actually have two stalks with more blooms on them. So that's the way to get more blooms on zinnias, is to pinch off the first one that comes up, and you'll have more stalks and more bushiness and more blooms. So anyway, corn looking absolutely amazing. I am very happy with the corn this season and all of the containers. We've got watermelons setting and cantaloupe setting and all kinds of things that are coming up and getting bushy, cucumbers that are beginning to bloom, and the kiddie pool, the straws, the strawberries are beginning to thicken up. More strawberries in there, watermelons that are planted in there, getting their runners, and you can kind of see the strawberries now if you look around for the little bits of red. It's kind of everywhere, and there's lots of green strawberries in there as well. So I'm looking at least getting a couple of pints out of this season, so I'd be really happy with that. Even though I'm allergic to strawberries, the rest of the family enjoys eating strawberries. And all the plants doing amazing except for the butter dish squash. I was really hoping to try those guys. I had not tried them before, but hopefully we'll get something out of them. And then the straight 8 cucumbers that we have planted over here in that god-awful soil, the Schultz, are doing terrible. But when I planted the straight 8 cucumbers in this one, which was a pot that I had with some old soil in it, they're doing amazing. And that's because this is the Master Garden soil, and those two are the Schultz soil. And amazing amount of growth on these spring burpless cucumbers, and I've been kind of trying to train them to go back into the trellis. But they're just getting so big. I mean, the leaves on these guys are massive, and I usually do not have cucumber leaves that big. So they're huge. And the straight 8 cucumbers that I planted back here, doing amazing. And then we have the Space Master over there, and they're blooming. The leaves are a lot smaller. They're a lot smaller cucumber, but that's because they're a bush cucumber, not a vining cucumber. And they are beginning to set cucumbers already. But I am so happy with the watermelon. I really hope we get some watermelon this season and some cantaloupes. But again, we're working with a shorter season because we got a later start due to frost and snow and all kinds of things. But the vines are looking so healthy in these containers that I'm thrilled with them. And of course, we've got some straight 8 cucumbers planted at the base of these tomatoes, and they should do pretty well as well, but they're a lot younger, a whole lot younger than the other ones. And then of course we have some more butter dish squash there, still just really slow. I may switch out the soil in them just to try to see if we can get them to pull out of the funk, but everything else looking amazing. And again, the herb garden just looking great. It suffered a little bit in the heat, and I'm looking at the radishes will probably bolt. So will the lettuce. But we have cucumbers and things in here that really enjoyed the heat, like that one over there, and a couple over here. So Anyway, everything looking great. So like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notices on new videos as they come out. And we shall see you in the next one.